November, Wyoming. A Native American woman staggers through the blizzard to a dying ranch, knowing this is her last chance before winter kills her. The rancher, alone, broke, abandoned by everyone who promised to help, starts to turn her away. Then she says the words that stop him cold. "Let me stay. I'll give you more than any white woman ever could." He thinks it's arrogance, desperation, maybe both. But within 72 hours, she'll save his dying cattle from disease, rebuild his fences against wolf attacks, and accomplish what 3 hired hands couldn't manage in 6 months. The question isn't whether she can deliver on her promise. The question is whether he's man enough to recognize her value and whether she'll stay once she proves she doesn't need him at all. The November wind cut through the Wyoming valley like a blade as Ayita approached the weathered ranch house. Snow had started falling an hour ago, and her thin blanket provided little protection against the cold. She'd walked for 2 days since leaving the reservation, surviving on stream water and the last of her dried meat. The ranch looked as desperate as she felt. Fences sagged under broken posts. The barn door hung crooked on rusted hinges. In the corral, a dozen cattle huddled together, their ribs showing through dull coats. This was a dying place, just like everything else she'd known. A man emerged from the barn, tall, maybe 35, with a face weathered by sun and disappointment. His clothes were clean but worn thin. Wyatt Henderson, she'd heard in town. A rancher, barely holding on after his hired hands quit, and his wife left for Denver last spring. "We don't have work," he called out before she could speak. His tone was flat, practiced. He'd probably turned away a dozen drifters this month alone. Ayita stopped 10 feet from him, straightening her spine despite exhaustion. "I'm not asking for work. I'm asking for shelter, 1 winter. In exchange, I'll give you more than any white woman ever could." Wyatt's expression hardened. "That's a bold claim. What makes you think your cattle are dying from blackleg disease?" she interrupted, nodding toward the corral. "That roan in the corner won't survive the week unless you isolate her and treat the wound on her rear leg. Your north fence line is down. I saw fresh wolf tracks 2 miles back, and your barn roof won't hold under heavy snow." His jaw tightened. Everything she'd said was true, and they both knew it. "I don't need charity cases," Wyatt said, "and I don't need a man who thinks my people are charity cases." Ayita met his eyes without flinching. "I need a roof before this storm gets worse. You need someone who knows how to keep animals alive through winter. I'm offering a trade, not begging for scraps." Wyatt studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the barn. "You can sleep in the loft, but you eat what you earn. If you can't pull your weight, you leave when the storm breaks." "Agreed." Ayita didn't wait for him to change his mind. She headed straight for the corral. The sick roan mare nickered weakly as Ayita approached. Up close, the infection was worse than she'd thought. The leg was swollen, hot to the touch, with green discharge seeping from a puncture wound. Probably stepped on something rusty. "You have any yarrow or comfrey?" she called to Wyatt. "Don't know what those are." "Whiskey, then, and clean cloth." Wyatt disappeared into the house, returning with a half-empty bottle and torn strips of an old shirt. He watched as Ayita cleaned the wound with melted snow, then poured whiskey over the infected area. The mare jerked, but didn't bolt. "She needs to be isolated," Ayita said, working methodically. "Blackleg spreads through soil. If one has it, others will follow unless you separate them." "I know what blackleg is," Wyatt said defensively. "Lost 3 head to it last month." "Then why haven't you treated the rest?" She didn't look up from her work. Silence. Then, "Didn't know how." For the next 3 hours, Ayita worked. She moved the sick mare to a separate stall, then examined every animal in the corral. 2 others showed early symptoms. She treated them all while Wyatt watched, his skepticism gradually shifting to something else, interest maybe, or recognition that she actually knew what she was doing. By nightfall, She'd reorganized the entire barn, isolated the sick cattle, and created a treatment schedule written in the dirt floor since Wyatt didn't have paper to spare. "Where'd you learn this?" he asked as she finally headed toward the loft. "My father was the best horse trader in 3 territories. My mother could birth a calf in a blizzard and have it standing within the hour. I learned from people who knew that survival isn't about words or promises. It's about work." She climbed the ladder without waiting for a response. The blizzard hit that night with the force of a freight train. Wind screamed through gaps in the barn walls. Snow piled against the doors. By dawn, the temperature had dropped so low that water froze in its bucket within minutes. Ayita was already working when Wyatt stumbled from the house, bundled in 3 layers. She'd somehow gotten the barn door functional, reinforcing it with rope and spare boards. The cattle were arranged to share body heat, and she'd built a small fire in a metal bucket, carefully positioned to warm the space without risking the hay. "How long have you been up?" Wyatt asked. "Does it matter?" She was checking the sick mare's leg, which already looked better. "Your fence line is the priority. Wolves won't wait for better weather. Can't fix fences in this." Wyatt gestured at the howling storm. "Can't afford not to." Ayita pulled on her thin blanket like armor. "Show me where your tools are." They worked through the morning, fighting wind that tried to knock them flat and snow that blinded them every few steps. Ayita moved with efficiency born from necessity, finding damaged posts, bracing them with whatever materials they had. She taught Wyatt techniques her father had shown her: how to set posts in frozen ground, how to angle braces against wind pressure, how to use deadfall wood to reinforce weak spots. By afternoon, they'd secured the critical sections. Ayita's hands were raw and bleeding from the work, but she didn't stop. She found the wolf tracks she'd mentioned, fresher now, closer. She studied them like a scout, then led Wyatt in building a barrier of thorny brush along the vulnerable approach. "They'll test it tonight," she said, her breath visible in the frigid air. "We need to take shifts watching." "You're not serious." She looked at him with an expression that answered the question. Of course she was serious. Survival demanded it. That night, Wyatt took the first watch while Ayita slept in the loft. When he woke her at midnight, he found her alert within seconds, moving to the barn door with a sharpened stick she'd prepared. The wolves came at 2 in the morning, 4 of them grey shadows against white snow. Ayita was ready. She'd positioned burning brands around the corral, creating a barrier of light and smoke. When the pack leader tested the thorny barrier, she was there, shouting and waving fire until they retreated into the darkness. Wyatt, watching from the barn door, saw her standing alone against the storm and the wolves, protecting his cattle with nothing but determination and knowledge. No fear, no hesitation, just competence. The storm broke 3 days later. In that time, Ayita had accomplished what Wyatt's previous hired hands hadn't managed in months. Every animal was accounted for. The sick cattle were recovering, the barn was weatherproof, and the ranch had survived. Wyatt found her in the corral, working with a young calf that had been born during the blizzard. The mother had rejected it, and Ayita was teaching it to drink from a bottle she'd fashioned from cloth and leather. "It was wrong," Wyatt said simply. Ayita didn't look up. "About what specifically?" "All of it." He leaned against the fence, watching her patient work with the calf. "My wife left because she said ranch life was too hard. My hired hands quit because they said the work wasn't worth the pay. And I believed that the problem was the ranch, or the location, or bad luck." "The problem was that they didn't know how to work," Ayita said. The calf finally latched onto the makeshift bottle, drinking eagerly. "Ranch life is hard. That's not a flaw, it's a fact. Complaining about it is like complaining about winter. Pointless. You've done more in 3 days than I've managed in 3 months. Because I had no choice." She finally looked at him, her dark eyes holding truths he was only beginning to understand. "You offered me shelter. That meant I had to earn it. I don't have the luxury of doing less than my best because someone will rescue me if I fail. I'm my own rescue." Wyatt was quiet for a moment. "The deal was 1 winter. I'm changing it. Stay as long as you want. Full share of whatever profit this place makes." "Profit?" Ayita almost smiled. "First we need to get these cattle healthy enough to sell. Then we need to repair the equipment. Then we need to figure out water management for spring. Profit is months away." "We," Wyatt repeated. "You said we." She shrugged. "Someone needs to make sure you don't make more foolish decisions." Spring came slowly to Wyoming. By the time the snow melted, Wyatt's ranch had transformed. Ayita had restructured everything, rotating grazing patterns to preserve grass, building irrigation channels from the creek, even training the cattle to respond to whistles instead of hard riding that stressed them. The neighboring ranchers noticed, started asking questions. Who was the Indian woman working Henderson's place? How had he turned around a failing operation so completely? Wyatt's answer was always the same. "She's my partner, best rancher in 3 counties. Word spread. Some neighboring ranchers sneered. A woman? A native woman running a ranch? Impossible. But their skepticism died when they saw Ayita's work. When Henderson's cattle went to market that fall, they were the healthiest in the region. The ranch that had been dying was now profitable. One evening, as they tallied the season's earnings, Wyatt divided the money into 2 equal piles. "Half for you as promised," he said. Ayita looked at the cash, more than she'd seen in her entire life. It represented security, independence, the ability to make choices. "What will you do with your half?" "Put it back into the ranch, buy more cattle, fix the house roof." He paused. "Maybe hire another hand for next season, if you think we need help." "We don't," Ayita said firmly. Then softer, "Not yet. Maybe in a year or 2 when we've expanded." Wyatt smiled. "You're planning long term. I'm planning survival. Same as always." She picked up her share of the money, feeling its weight. "This changes things for me. I can buy land, start my own place maybe." Something flickered across Wyatt's face. Disappointment, perhaps. "You've earned that right." Ayita studied him. Over the months, they'd built something rare, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared labor. He'd never treated her as lesser, never questioned her decisions once he'd seen the results. And she'd found something unexpected here, not just shelter, but purpose. "Or," she said carefully, "I could invest it here, make this place bigger, better, a ranch that proves what's possible when people judge by competence instead of skin color." "You'd stay." "I never said I was leaving." Ayita met his eyes. "I said I'd give you more than any white woman ever could. I meant it, but it was never about them. It was about me. Proving what I'm capable of, and I'm not finished yet." Wyatt extended his hand, not as employer to worker, but as equal to equal. "Partners, then, full shares, full say in decisions." Ayita shook his hand firmly. "Partners." Through the window, the Wyoming sun set over land they'd saved together. The ranch that had been dying now thrived. Testament to what determination, knowledge, and relentless work could accomplish. Ayita had arrived desperate and cold, reduced to begging for shelter. She was leaving that woman behind, not through anyone's charity, but through her own unbreakable will. She'd promised to give more than others could. She'd kept that promise, not because she was better than any white woman, but because she refused to be less than herself. And in doing so, she'd earned something more valuable than money or shelter. She'd earned respect on her own terms, through her own actions. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than anything else the world could offer.